So you just test the, make sure that it's getting sound. Yep.
I'm going to call the board meeting to order. Will the board secretary take the roll?
Mr. Jim Bard.
Here.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Here.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Here.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Here.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Here.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Here.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Here.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Here.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Present.
Mr. Aryan Gaunkar.
Here.
Miss Lily Kell.
Here.
Everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
A roll flag back here.
I pledge allegiance. As we begin our deliberations this evening, let us once again be reminded of our duty to represent all of the children in the school community, regardless of age, sex, race, or creed, and regardless of need or ability. May we now have a moment of silence to reflect on our thoughts, plans, and actions on behalf of the students of the school district, and a moment of silence for Edna Besor, who passed away September 27th. She was a 1947 graduate. Donna Lee Helm, who passed away September 30th. Donna was a 1957 graduate and retired cafeteria kitchen helper at the middle school. Chelsea Heckman, who passed away October 3rd. She was a 2003 graduate. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody who are watching on YouTube. We're going to move on to the agenda approval. Dr. Moyer, are there any changes, additions, or deletions to the agenda as presented?
President Butterball, there are not.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Bard. Is there a second?
Fred Scott seconds.
Second by Mr. Scott. Roll call.
Mr. Jim Bard.
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler.
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly.
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz.
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott.
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger.
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters.
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christy. We have two public comment periods for our board meeting. The first public comment period is right now, and it's for any public comment regarding any agenda item. Then at the end of the meeting, we have a second comment period where citizens are welcome to comment on any other item they may wish to address the board. If you do have a public comment, please come up to the podium and the microphone. State your name and your address and whether you're a district resident for the record. And I'll now open public comment for those agenda items. I have a list here of people who have signed in. I do not see any. Is there anybody who wishes to come up and address an agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to the board agenda. Student representative reports. Lily?
Thank you. The Focus on Engineering field trip was held on October 4th for students who are interested in professional field of engineering. All AP US history classes enjoyed a field trip to Philadelphia on October 3rd to Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, and Valley Forge. Sharp's Broadway Club and drama classes all participated in a field trip to the PA Renaissance Fair on October 5th. The National Honor Society welcomed new members with a ceremony on October 6th. The See You at the Pole event was held on September 28th. During the event, students and other participants could pray around the flag for the upcoming year. Students will be able to paint their parking spots with an approved design this coming Sunday. A club fair was held on September 28th where various clubs at the high school could advertise and recruit students for this year. The school arranged a college visit to Kutztown University on September 30th. I will now pass the rest of the report to Aryan Gaunkar.
Thank you. High school golfers Mason Folsonger and Ava Frontina qualified for the District 3 tournament, with Ava being the first girl in our school history to have made it this far. The homecoming court was nominated on September 29th, with Maya Mankemeyer taking the win. The college visit to Millersville University was arranged on October 4th. Last week, students raised money for the Cumberland County Breast Cancer Alliance through Points for a Cause. The FFA was able to collect 213 toy donations for the Hershey's Children's Hospital through Weston's Toy Drive. The high school held a homecoming spirit week, each class competing for the most school spirit, with the class of 2026 winning the competition. The homecoming football game was held on Friday night, with the Greyhounds scoring a win for 14-10 with Gettysburg. Later on Saturday, the homecoming dance was arranged with over 600 students in attendance. PSAT testing will be conducted on Wednesday for students who have signed up. Career field trip to Messiah University is scheduled for Thursday.
Thank you, Arian. Thank you, Lily. Move on to the Franklin County Career Center report. Mr. Burt?
Thank you very much. We have a few slides that I'd like to show tonight.
Let's see. I think Fred has something to report. Becky, Outreach Committee.
Can we,
Unfortunately, they came embedded in the email, so I couldn't open them individually.
oh, how unfortunate. Well, if you can see the slides, the slides to the left include 200 students that were hosted by industry partner D.H. Martin recently in their facility in Scotland, where they learned about careers that are available with that company in construction, transportation, sales, and service. And that event got a lot of widespread publicity, including the public opinion was there and did a nice article. They also did quite a bit of publicity on the Career Center's Facebook page. The next slide, the one at the bottom, as you recall in previous reports, we'd mentioned that we agreed and opened a new program at the school to support early childhood education. Last year, the program was open one semester, and this will be the first full year of the program. We had showed in previous reports the construction of this playground area, which is now complete. So I wanted to show that as well. And that concludes the Franklin County Career and Technology Center report for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Burt. My understanding is we had 3 committee meetings, so we'll start with safety. Mr. Scott?
Safety or?
Did you have one, Mr. Scott?
I have one for the transportation, but safety.
Oh, transportation.
Transportation.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we had a meeting last week with the transportation director and Ms.
Can you pick the microphone?
We had a meeting last week with, was last week, wasn't it, Don? That we discussed about the transportation of the school district. And a lot of things came to light that need to be addressed. The lack of bus drivers, distancing from Walker students from to the school district, the proposal of looping that might have to be necessary. We don't know the full scope of that. But hazardous routes that we're concerned about the routes, that some of them need to be checked to make sure there's safety with PennDOT. So we're going to have more on this, but they're going to pretty much redo the transportation policy, bring it up to date, and to bring more things to light. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Outreach Committee, Mrs. Wolfinger?
Sure. So the outreach committee met twice last week, the first time on October 3rd, and that was to kind of help prepare for a meeting with Philip Faig from the Greyhound Foundation on October 6th. So during the meeting with Philip Faig on October 6th, we reviewed the proposed job description for an executive director who would be in charge of fundraising and grant writing, and also a collaborative 50-50 partnership with the school district. We discussed how this position would be at least a 3-year long-term commitment, both for the Greyhound Foundation and for the school district as well, and how that might help to serve the needs of our community and also our school district. So the Outreach Committee would like to move forward with a commitment from our district to this partnership, as you'll see in the discussion agenda this evening. In the upcoming weeks, we do plan on meeting to finalize the job description and also a potential budget for the position. I do want to personally thank Philip Faig for taking time out last week out of his busy schedule to meet with us. I truly feel this position has the potential to add much needed financial resources to our district.
Thank you, Mrs. Wolfinger. Policy Committee?
Thank you very much. The Policy Committee met this afternoon, beginning at 4:30, to review policies. Just as a reminder, the Policy Committee does not actually write policy, but the purpose of the committee is to review policy that is referred to us from PSBA's policy team as well as legal team, and then after review from our solicitor, Stock and Leader, we will review the policies, ask any questions to be potentially returned for clarification and so forth, and then ultimately recommendation to this board in the form of a discussion agenda item for first read, followed 2 weeks later by action agenda and second read. And the results of this afternoon's meeting is we have unanimously approved 3 policies that will be coming to the board in the next meeting for discussion as recommended by the administration and the policy committee for first read by the full board. And those are all 3 new policies. Policy number 150, comparability of services, policy number 209.2, diabetes management, and policy 255, educational stability for children in foster care. And of course, we will continue to meet regularly and continue to move forward through our total group of policies. And that concludes the Policy Committee's report for this evening.
Mr. President, Dr. Moore was right. We did have a safety committee, and we talked to Chief Carter, Chambersburg School District, to get another option about what we need in this school district. So we're going to set up, Dr. Moore is going to set up a date that we'll have public discussion so the people in the public can come and know what we're thinking about and what we'd like to do in the future.
Well, that brings up a point that I wanted to make. I see on the discussion agenda, 6I is the proposal for a safety and security officer for the school district. And I'm not sure that it's appropriate that it be on the discussion agenda yet because there hasn't been a public forum and there hasn't been a recommendation from the safety committee. So at this point, until the safety committee begins making a recommendation, I'm going to strike 6I from the discussion agenda so it does not appear on the action agenda at the next meeting. Anything else, Fred?
No, that's all. Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Budebal. I have a couple of informational things, and then I have some random remarks. I am realizing that my days here at the front table are limited. And there's a rumor that our new superintendent may be starting with this maybe by the end of this month, but I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth. So I thought I better take a chance and say something profound. Unfortunately, I don't have anything really profound to say, but I do have a few remarks that I would like to make. But number one, informational. I'd like to thank Sherry Woodall for the job that she did in putting together a very productive in-service day for our professional staff today. I think we had a good day overall in that regard. I also would like to do a shout out to Lauren and to Bethany for conducting a tour around the campus on, I believe it was on Friday morning, where we visited several special education classrooms, and I think that was very enlightening for those that were able to make it. At some point, I would really like for the rest of the board to be able to have that opportunity again. So we may give you another opportunity at some point down the road. And then finally, I would also like to thank Mrs. Spizak and the board for your support in hiring Mrs. Spizak to assist me, and for the job that she has already done in moving a lot of our policies along with Mr. Burt, the chairperson of the committee, and his committee. So I really appreciate all their efforts. And also, she's putting a few fires out for me along the way, which has enabled me to get out to be a little more visible in the buildings. Very much appreciated. A couple of items. I Item 6I and item 6K, and I know President Butterball mentioned about the safety and security item. I do want to share with you that the administrative team feels pretty strongly, we do want to work with the Safety and Security Committee, that we would move forward eventually with a partnership with the Shippensburg Borough Police. We have a lot of compelling reasons behind that. We would like to conduct, with the blessing of the Safety and Security meeting, the Safety and Security Committee, we would like to conduct a community forum at some point as early as next week, if at all possible. Sherry Woodall, Christy Lentz, Dave Lindemuth, and myself would really like the opportunity to do a brief presentation, and then we would like to turn it over to anybody from the community that would like to make remarks. But we feel, and I believe we also have the blessing of our new superintendent on this, we feel very strongly that we have several compelling reasons that going with the borough and partnering with the Shippensburg Borough for a armed police in our buildings makes an awful lot of sense. Then just for the general public here, we will share a little bit of a comparison of the three options that we've looked at: the partnership and proposal with the borough, G-Force security agency, as well as the possibility of creating our own police force. All three options have a lot of merit to them, all three of them. But we believe far and away partnering with the borough, given this time where we are at Shippensburg, makes an awful lot of sense. The other thing I would like to say with 6K, the partnership with the Greyhound Foundation for an executive director. I just couldn't be more excited for where this district is in partnering with the foundation. And let me just say this also. We have a very conscientious group of people on this school board that are great stewards who really work hard to make good decisions on complex issues that are not easy to deal with. And sometimes we get bogged down in a lot of debate and an analysis. And I think that's natural for that to happen because we have good people that want to make really good decisions, because many of these decisions we're going to have to live with for quite some time. But at the same time, I would just like to say the Shippensburg School District and the board is currently in a unique position at this time and place where we have an opportunity to make a great investment in this community. The Greyhound Foundation, the Shippensburg Borough, the Shippensburg University are all reaching out to us for partnering opportunities. I think it would be very prudent on our part to reciprocate and partner with these groups because, as I was sharing with Mr. Bird in the hallway before our meeting, when you have really good people that are stakeholders, really good things could happen and come from that. And I am personally greatly excited about the long-term potential with us laying that kind of foundation. And I think Mr. August is going to do a super job facilitating these stakeholder groups, and with your support and the leadership team here in this community, the sky is the limit, frankly. And then finally, on a tragic note, in Gettysburg yesterday, we lost a high school senior to suicide. The high school principal, in talking with mom, wants it to be known it was suicide. And we as a community and we as a state, a nation, need to do something to move forward, in my opinion, with dealing with these mental health issues that our young people are dealing with. So I would just encourage the board, please know, and this leadership team, we do not want to do the status quo. Whatever it means in helping our kids, and I'm not sure what that looks like exactly. I know a couple of meetings ago we had a survey tool called Terrace Metrics that at least does a mental health screening that can provide us some data and can red flag some students that might be struggling and so on. I don't know if that's the answer or not, but I'm just encouraging this board and this Shippensburg community that the status quo isn't good enough, that we need to do something, and I'm not sure exactly what that is. But if that can happen in Gettysburg, I think we all know, and I'm preaching to the choir, we all know it could happen here or anywhere across our nation, and we just need to do what we can. Doing nothing is not an option, in my opinion. We need to do something. With that, that concludes my report. Should There is one more thing. I lied. My report wasn't quite over. We did have an anonymous donation on page 3 of 14, an anonymous donation of several musical instruments, 7 clarinets, 3 flutes, 1 saxophone, 1 trombone, 1 snare drum, 1 piccolo, 3 violins, 1 ukulele for the use at the Shippensburg Area Intermediate School. This donation would be probably worth about $2,000. The donor would not allow us to recognize them. Unfortunately, I was hoping we'd be able to do that, but that's not possible. So I know that Terry Mowry and the team at the intermediate school are very happy about this donation. They will put it to good use.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Moyer. Go ahead and schedule a special safety committee meeting for next week to discuss the policing option.
Thank you.
As I do at every board meeting until he's sitting beside me to my right, I'm going to introduce again for folks who are new here, Mr. August, who is the new superintendent for the school district. I did sign your contract, so you're kind of stuck here now. Move on to the consent agenda. 4A is recommending approval of the minutes from September 26th. 4B are your finance reports. 4C, personnel, professional staff. Administration recommends approval of the following professional contract status for the following professional staff members who have completed their 3 years of satisfactory service. Ashley Coy, physical education teacher. Christopher Napolitan, 5th grade teacher. And Alexis Peterson, learning support. Administration recommends approval of the following FMLA qualifying leave. Crystal Gipe, special education teacher at the middle school, requesting leave from January 3rd, continuing through approximately February 14th. Support staff. Administration recommends approval of the following resignation. Megan Snyder, part-time kitchen helper at Nancy Grayson. Administration recommends approval of the following change of hours. Swarup Patel, part-time technology specialist, working at 5 hours to part-time technology specialist working 8 hours a week. 8 hours. Yes. Administration recommends approval of the following support staff employees who have completed their 60-day probationary period. Christina Black, classroom assistant at the middle school. Brandon Fisher, classroom assistant at the middle school. Administration recommends approval of the following new appointments. Alicia Wright, part-time noon aide at the intermediate school. Paul Yeager, full-time floater custodian for the district. Supplemental staff, the following coaches are recommended for approval for the 2022-2023 winter coaching season. Rather than do all that, you can check the list out there for a second. Administration recommends approval of the following new appointments. Adam Winnick, high school drama musical director, and Adam Winnick, high school play production director. Administration recommends approval of the following volunteer coaches. Hayden Carball, middle school football. Kelly Finke, high school swim and dive. Administration recommends approval of the following ESER's after-school program appointments. You can see the list there. And the administration recommends approval of the following ESER after-school tutoring appointments. Administration recommends approval of the following attached list of position volunteers per Board Policy 916. 4D, Memorandum of Agreement between the school district and the Shippensburg Area Education Association. 4E, request to form a woodworking club. 4F, partnership with Franklin County Children and Youth Services. Would any member like to take any of the any items on the consent calendar separately?
I'd like to take F separately, please.
4F is going to be taken separately. Any others? Is there a motion to approve 4A, B, C, D, and E?
Fred Scott, make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Scott to approve 4A through 4E. Is there a second?
Becky Wolfinger, second.
Second by Mrs. Wolfinger. Discussion?
I just have a comment on the coaches. Does the athletic committee get a list for the recommendation for the coaches yet? their evaluation?
No, we never did on any of the coaches ever.
Nor do I think we should, actually.
Could be to, if we're gonna approve them again. What's that?
I couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I just asked if they were ever run by the athletic committee for the approval. I mean, it's, no one approved it on here. It's just there.
Well, I think our administrative team approved it. So I'm taking their recommendation. I'm okay with that. I think this was a practice that, what you're talking about, happened years and years ago. I think the athletic committee used to meet with coaches at the end of the season. I was a part of some of those meetings. And probably about 8 years ago, I think that's when that changed. I was still coaching here, and that changed. And so I'm fine with the recommendation the way it came. I think that's wonderful, and I appreciate the input of our administrative team on this.
Yeah, I am on the athletic committee. If there's a problem, people bring it to us, we address it. I don't go looking for issues. If there's an issue, tell me about it and we'll handle it. But I'm like Levi. The administration recommends, I'm going to approve it.
Does the athletic committee ever see any of the evaluations,
Of what?
the coaches?
No, and again, I don't know that we should. I don't know that it's fair for me. I'm not in practice every day. I'm not at every. I love to go to sporting events. I can't go to every game. I don't know that it's fair for me to be involved in that process.
I don't evaluate teachers. They just send me names of teachers, and I don't get to evaluate teachers.
Teachers are hired, they're not reappointed.
Well,
There's a big difference there. When you hire them, you have the right to ask questions regarding their education, their background, their experience.
But who does that?
Coaches are reappointed every year.
Who does that? The evaluation. Who does the hiring? Who does that? You said
The administration does and then recommends those teachers and staff to us.
Okay.
But these positions are reappointed every year, and they're evaluated.
But they're by the administration, and they tell us what their recommendation.
So my only question is when these evaluations are done, are they ever forwarded to the athletic committee just to review evaluations? And I take it, by the way the conversation's going, I take it that doesn't occur.
It was in a personnel file. There's complaints. I can go back and look at that if I need to. That's the only place I go.
Dr. Moyer, could you just give us a little bit? I mean, what's your stance from an administrative standpoint on this?
Yeah, I would just say in my 26 years in school administration, we have not shared personnel files or coaching evaluations with board members. That from time to time, there are concerns that come up that we deal with the concerns. Most districts, at least the ones that I've been a part of, we haven't had separate athletic committees. We do have a subcommittee here as the athletic committee. And I do believe there was a time when I was here 14 years ago that I do believe head coaches used to meet with the athletic committee briefly to just go over their season and so on, if memory serves. And that's a big if.
That brings me to another, I guess we can't talk about it because it's going to be a personnel issue. What happened last year? What's wrestling coach? I would just make one further remark regarding evaluations. When we evaluate our coaching staff or our teaching staff or any of our staff members, if there is an incident of concern or something where someone could have done better, we certainly address that. But we evaluate a person on their full body of work, not on one scenario or one incident.
All right, but before we move on to the Scott Wolfinger motion, the board is going to convene in a quick executive session.
No. You're gonna be here when we get back. I think you would be.
Mark, would you like?
Yes. You too. Can you show your night, you too?
take them separately. Board is back from executive session. Board convened into executive session to briefly discuss a personnel matter. The motion on the floor is to approve 4A through 4E. Mr. Scott makes the motion. Mrs. Wolfinger seconds. Is there any further discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Dwayne Burt,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christie. 4F, partnership with Franklin County Youth and Children, Franklin County Children and Youth Services. Is there a motion to approve 4F?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Goetz. Is there a second?
Fred Scott seconds.
Second by Mr. Scott. Discussion?
So I had a few, I did reach out to some of administration with some of the concerns and questions that I had pertaining bringing a government agency into our school district who has the authority to take children away from their parents. When I had reached out, one of the responses was due to truancy concerns. Or it would be nice if they had a point of contact to work with the truancy. I have not heard once of our district having truancy concerns besides attendance issues at James Byrd, which would pretty much has them on the school improvement plan. When it was said that there would be a space for the children and youth at the intermediate school, how does that work by having a Franklin County social worker in an office in Cumberland County? And again, this was not a district initiative. This was children and youth coming to our school, and I just feel that both organizations have a commitment to children. Franklin County Children and Youth would still need to do their job if they were not in our building and still have that obligation, and so do our staff as mandated reporters. If I'm giving my signature of approval or my stamp of approval by bringing this agency in that does have the authority to take children away from their parents, I want to know exactly what resources they are providing these parents and what exactly are they going to be doing in our buildings. My concern is that if parents are already fearful and struggling parenting, that they might not send their children if they know that this agency is in our buildings out of fear of being taken away. Maybe they're not even to that point, but they just might be fearful in general.
I'm not sure I have the answer to that. Sherry, I think, was it you and Terry that met with the group and so on? I do know this, in working with children and youth authorities and our relationship with the school systems, as a very, very last resort, do are children taken away, unless it's a very severe situation. And I do believe that they would help us out with more than truancy issues. That was one of probably several examples where they would help us out to some degree. Sherry, do you have anything additional to that?
So Lauren and Terry actually met with them, but I can talk about my experiences with children and youth. And children and youth are not the agencies that just come and rip children away. They're a social work agency that really works with parents and families to try to get them the resources that they need to remove those barriers. So truancy is an issue in every single school. There are always a subset of students who don't come to school. So it's not high enough at the intermediate school to get us on an improvement plan yet. But it's still an issue, not to mention it's an issue at James Byrd, it's an issue at Nancy Grace, and it's an issue here at the high school. And it's actually on our comprehensive plan. One of the areas that we're trying to improve is improving our school culture to make sure all kids want to come to school and all kids feel safe at school. So when we're looking at this, and Lauren, you can speak up too, but I think it's more of just to get them here so they can work closer with the families to help break down those barriers that are preventing children from coming to school, especially at an elementary age. I know I was talking to somebody at the middle school earlier, and they're truant in 8th grade, but that truancy started in kindergarten. So by the time the students get to 8th grade, they've already developed those habits they're not going to come to school, like that they're already set. So this is hopefully going to help with getting somebody in the building to work with our families to get students to school at a younger age so they don't develop those habits where in middle school and high school they eventually drop out.
When, have been a police officer and deal with children and youth, if a child lives in Cumberland County Children and Youth lives in Franklin County Children and Youth. Number two, they're not putting nobody here full-time, are they?
No,
Because I know they.
2 to 3 days a week is what
They hope.
is proposed, 2 to
Well,
3
that-
days a week.
No, I know
What
you're
it
saying.
doesn't make sense is how their office is going to be in Franklin or Cumberland County.
How are they going to service? I mean, I know they would service the Franklin County students, even though their office would be there, they would service the Franklin County students. Lauren, I don't know if they would have permission to serve the Cumberland.
They do not. In meeting with Cumberland County reached out, or Franklin County reached out to every district within Franklin County. So Chambersburg, Waynesboro, Tuscarora, Shippensburg, all of the districts were contacted. The reason that the space was identified at the intermediate school was simply a facilities issue. The individual would not be assigned to the intermediate school. They would supervise, or they would help support any student, any Franklin County student in any of our district buildings. SACE just happened to be the only place that had office space available, which is why that was identified. But again, it was an initiative that they are putting in every single school district. So I believe Chambersburg and Waynesboro have 2 full-time children and youth workers currently in their districts because of their size. Obviously, because we share a footprint in both Franklin and Cumberland County, our referrals to Franklin County aren't as large, number one, and number two, district size-wise, we aren't as large as some of those neighboring schools.
Lauren, what resources would they be able to provide that you feel would be beneficial to our district?
So in speaking with Franklin County children and youth, their goal, and they will tell you this, is always family unification. Their goal is not to remove students. So again, they do offer again, I'm just going off of what I personally know. They have ABC is a program in Franklin County that they're offering parent training, parent resources, different abilities. But again, there's also a truancy elimination program that they run that would be offered to families. Franklin County's perspective is that they believe that by putting social workers and children and youth workers in the school, it will decrease referrals, unnecessary referrals, because they can provide supports as opposed to us just always contacting and making a children and youth referral. Additionally, they believe that it would lead to quicker expediting of cases in the event that we do have a concern that would warrant investigation. They're no longer waiting, 24 hours or 48 hours to potentially meet with a student. There's not the possibility that a student is going home to an unsafe environment. If a matter is serious enough that would warrant investigation, they could support in that moment.
Any other comments?
Well, I would just say this. I think I would have been more comfortable had this item been tabled to allow further discussion, further understanding on the further fleshing out of the program and the expectations, further understanding on the part of the board, perhaps an opportunity for our incoming superintendent, Mr. August, to weigh in on this subject, and perhaps he has. I certainly don't want to put him on the spot. But in my mind, this is and it may be the perfect move. It doesn't really make sense to me why we would put Franklin County children and youth in an office in a Cumberland County school where they would have no clients to service in that school building just because of space, which really brings up yet a whole nother subject. Evidently, we must be out of space or haven't been able to identify space as of yet in the two schools that we actually have in Franklin County. But in my mind, that would be my recommendation, is to pull this and table it if the board would agree, and allow us. It may be the best program that we've ever seen, and yet it's a really big move to take in one step with this little discussion.
And just to clarify, it's where the student resides, not where the school resides. So if the student is a Franklin County resident, Franklin County Children and Youth picks up the case. It's not where the referring school occurs. So even if the school is located in Cumberland County, if the student's residence is in Franklin County Children and Youth is going to pick up the case.
Any other discussion on the Goetz-Scott motion to approve? Roll call?
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
No.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
No.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt,
No.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
No.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
5 yeses. Motion carried.
Move on to the action agenda. 5A is the Lincoln Intermediate Unit Number 12 Agreement for Bilingual Speech. Is there a motion to approve 5A?
Red Scott, make a motion to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Scott. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Goetz. Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christie. 5B, Sunday use of facilities request for Sunday, November 6th to hold Fall Fest at Nancy Grayson Elementary School. The request is being made pursuant to Board Policy 707. Is there a motion to approve 5B?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Suiters. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Wolfinger. Discussion? Roll call?
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christie. 5C is the retroactive approval for security for the homecoming dance that was held on Saturday, October 8th. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Suiters. Is there a second?
Red Scott seconds.
Second by Mr. Scott. Discussion? I have one quick question. Why retroactive approval when we knew when homecoming was? Why didn't that make it on a prior agenda?
A good question. What happened, we kind of heard at the 11th hour that G-Force, the group that we do have board approved, did not have the personnel to help us out with that. So I made a decision that we wanted to have some assistance there and be proactive.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christie. 5D is the approval to apply for and accept a grant from PDE Food Service Equipment Grant. Is there a motion to approve 5D?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Suiters. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Goetz. Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christie. 5E is the addendum to agreement with ESS Northeast. This is for long-term substitute teachers. Is there a motion to approve 5E?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Goetz. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bard. Discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. I know that on this thing, I know before is this the same company we had before to get substitutes?
Yeah.
I believe it's the same company.
I think so.
That Dr.
Yes.
Moyer's through, correct?
Yes.
And I know last time we brought them on board, it was discussion about the money. How big an increase have we incurred from this company? You know?
I'm sorry, Fred, I didn't hear the question.
I mean, last time Mr. Burke brought up about how much it's costing us, which is right, about that. How much of an increase are we incurring for this new one?
I'm not sure that would be accurate. We set the substitute rates within the district.
So,
And I've encouraged us to continue to look to be, competitive, to ensure that we can fill our sub roles and so forth, which I believe is prudent. That would have been the only comments that I would.
didn't we pay them, though, to do it? Didn't we pay them a certain amount? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought we paid them so much to do the service.
Well, I think our business administrator, could perhaps more clearly answer, but there certainly is a markup for their services. They pay all the related payroll costs and so forth, and they would also, make a profit and so forth in order to stay in business. But again, it's the service that we've been using, and we set the substitute rates, which I think is the most critical and component and the part that we control.
I have no qualm about the rate we pay them, but Christie, the increase wasn't substantial or anything like that for the service? To your knowledge, or just offhand?
So are you talking about the ESS rate? They have not increased their rate.
Okay.
As far as I know, it's still at, I think, the 29.9% markup rate. So that has not increased since I think I've been here.
Okay.
That's what you're talking, the whole markup rate.
No, but then never mind. Okay, I'm comfortable with it.
Any other comments? Roll call?
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt,
Yes.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christie. 5F, before we take any motions, I believe Mark is here from K&W Engineering.
Let's go back.
Good evening. Thank you.
Get to hear this.
So I'm here this evening, I guess, in follow-up from last 2 weeks ago. We had a meeting. I also did speak with Mr. Kreitz and Mr. Spar on Friday, knowing that this item was on the agenda tonight. We had talked about a district-wide feasibility study for athletics. I don't know if you saw the letter that we issued on Friday. It was basically just a summary that said, we've started to dig into that study. It's going to take a little bit longer than 2 weeks to go through a full district-wide feasibility study for athletics. What we had said was, hey, if there was a motion for action tonight on the rest of the design and permitting, they were willing to add that scope of services into that contract for no additional fee. It would be the first component of what we would do before anything else would proceed with that project, in order to answer some of the questions that have come about relative to all of the district's facilities, practice schedule, game schedule, conditions of those facilities, et cetera. So, to be honest, I was a little confused coming out of last month's meeting. If it was to get the study done was going to be a little tough in 2 weeks because of talking to some stakeholders. Typically, we actually do this work as part of our overall process under that contract, and it would be the first component. Period. Happy to answer questions. I wasn't exactly sure where the board wanted to head with that particular item, the feasibility study itself, or the ultimate design and permitting for the project.
I have two questions.
Yes, sir.
First, you said you wouldn't be able to get the study done in a 2-week period. I understand that.
Sure.
So what is the time period?
Probably closer to another 3 or 4 weeks. That's to make sure we get time talking to, some key stakeholders, like, starting with athletic director, administration and staff, coaches, and then reaching out as well to borough representatives, university representatives. We'll actually reach out to, depending on what names they give us for youth sports that might use those same facilities. That's what takes the longest.
All right, a follow-up question to that. The motion, as it is written on 5F, what does this really do?
So that would authorize essentially the design and permitting of your athletic facilities, period. Subsequently, so that is things like going through the actual detailed design, the permitting and approvals processes, ultimately taking that to bidding and construction. None of those things happen until we do what we're hearing is do this district-wide feasibility study first to kind of help the district validate, I guess, and get a better handle on the facilities you have, which then leads us to some of the questions that we've all shared here, multiple times. What does the project want to look like? There is a scope of work identified in that additional service that is, hey, we put things together based on what we thought we heard from the group. That may well change. That could become, hey, as we talk through, we suggest the steering committee be part of this. That's kind of a liaison between us as the designers and you as the board and the administration. So we kind of have one focal point of who we're talking to. That can be representatives from the board, from the administration, however you would choose to set it up. That's kind of been our experience in the past. But that helps us then talk through with that group. Do you want and do you have the money for concessions building? What does that building consist of and include? Same thing with other amenities. We aren't here to be prescriptive necessarily about what amenities you want to include in the project. We lift up ideas, we discuss them with that group. There's a lot of times a conversation around budget that says, we can only afford this much based on other projects we have. Let's make the project be that. Sorry, long-winded answer to your question, but it's that whole gamut of things from pencil to paper, through design, through permitting and approvals, through construction, bidding, and then construction, all the way to the end of that process.
And my final question is if the study that you're talking about, or feasibility study you're talking about, is going to take an additional 3 weeks, by approving 5F, is there really going to be anything of substance that would even occur over the next 3 weeks until that feasibility study's done?
There'll be a little bit of work. I mean, it'll be fairly nominal, but it's stuff that we will need to advance that next part of the work, the big chunk of the work. But yeah, for the most part, no.
Thanks.
Sure.
Let me get some clarification here. Sure. What do I need to start the project at this new stadium? What do I need, or what do you need other than our vote? Start the project.
Authorization to proceed. We need to be under contract.
So even if we came through with that, we still had to give you authorization. You can't do anything without our authorization, correct?
I mean, we could, but we're at risk to not get paid.
Yeah,
right? I mean, not to be
that's what I'm talking about.
Capitalist about it, but that's kind of what it comes down to is we need to be under contract. Plus, for us, there becomes some liability issues, too, that if we aren't engaged, that we have some challenges with our professional liability folks to kind of approach that and doing work for free.
But again, I'm trying to understand the scope here. Over the next 3 weeks, you're going to be completing this feasibility study. And 3 to 4 weeks, all right, to accurately quote you. So from now till then, even with this approval of 5F, there's nothing really of significant substance that's really going to occur? Is that my understanding?
As we understand, that's the board's desire to do that work first. We would do that work first. Normally.
Work what? The feasibility study?
Yes.
Okay, I understand.
Yep.
All right.
Again, we're happy to step into it under that construct. I think really where we kind of ultimately came around to was we wanted that to be part of the contract, fully understanding and in full transparency that we're not going to advance the rest of that design and permitting work until we get through the feasibility study and have that discussion. But we need to have that. We've far extended ourselves beyond the original feasibility work that we were contracted for. That was kind of the stadium or Veterans Memorial and high school. We'd like to get this work under that. But again, it's more kind of an administrative effort to say, yeah, it's not part of the contract, but you're exactly right. We're not going to dig in on design until we get through that next 3 or 4 weeks of feasibility study. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So that work that you guys are planning on doing in the next 3 to 4 weeks, does that include what Mark had asked for with coming up with some kind of design work to include Memorial, but just a renovation at Memorial versus knocking it all down and building it back up?
Yeah, there'll be an evaluation. So, and again, I apologize because this kind of came up quite honestly, I wasn't sure this was going to be on the agenda tonight, so this letter was from Friday. It does give a description of that scope where we kind of go, first things first, we're going to look at existing fields and facilities, which would include Veterans Memorial, kind of analyze. We've already done some of that up here, we just haven't documented. So we would do that. Then we talk about, okay, and this has come up a few times, future needs. You know, are there sports that are being contemplated? Are there sports, hey, we're seeing growth or we see a need? Let's make sure we factor those in, look at all those facilities to figure out where those things want to go, which would include Veterans Memorial, right? And then lastly, we kind of compile all those things to say, okay, here's what we're kind of seeing out of existing conditions, plus what we think, what we've heard y'all would need in terms of, hey, status quo with your sports, or we need more to say, here's kind of what we think that picture looks like. It is not to try and arrive at a, okay, there's a goal and we're trying to make the study get there. That's not the point. The point is you do the study to say, okay, yeah, you could, here's what a no new turf field or new field at all would do. Here's what a new turf field would do. All those things get evaluated as part of that study. Yes?
But you've already done a feasibility study on this park in the school?
That was for a full stadium, though.
Oh, yeah, well, that's full
That
stadium.
was not renovated.
Right.
Yeah.
No, yes, he did. Yes, he did. Because you had renovation, didn't you? Because it came up $2,000 more than the stadium to renovate that. You had to move the baseball field. You had to
No,
move.
no, no. I think this feasibility study more is not a multi-purpose stadium at Veterans Stadium, but more for perhaps a miniature, like a practice field and things like that. This board has already voted where the multi-purpose stadium goes, and this board has never repealed that vote.
Then why are we can't get the stadium, then why are we worrying about the practice?
Because I think that there's concern among the board and even some in the administration that we need a second field.
I'm not arguing that part, but I'd like to get the first one done. What do I need to do, or what do we need the board to get the first field done?
Well, he just told you. They got to finish this feasibility study, and then they're moving on to design.
Yeah, and maybe this will help. Like, so really kind of that initial effort we did was more focused on like sketch planning that kind of said, hey, we could fit these types of fields or amenities in this rotation and those cost X. That wasn't based on okay, let's have a more detailed discussion with administration, athletic director, coaches, borough representatives, et cetera, to say, hey, what's kind of the collective need that then informs, okay, that seems to lead us more to, maybe it does, to one of the sketches that we already established. And this is kind of more of we'll take a half step back, let's vet through some of the existing conditions, proposed sports. This is what we think may be needed. Then we kind of come back to where we were with sketches, whether it's at the high school or at Veterans, probably both, to say, okay, here's what we think it looks like. We'll give you an inventory of all your fields, too, that says, all right, at the Pizza Hut field, here's what we understand occurs. So you've got kind of this, more comprehensive picture of all of your facilities. All of that, to your point, is it's a little bit of it's not a step back, but kind of it's a step back to say, all right, do that assessment, to then bring us more forward to that assessment's telling us, here's what we think the needs are for the district from an athletic facility standpoint.
But if we approved what you have, what's on the agenda, what you're saying now, and we not go back and change if we not locations, but diagram program, it can be modified.
Yes.
So, you understand? I'm saying, why can't we do the one field, and then anything else beyond that, we can modify? Is that true? Did I miss something?
Yes. Our response here was based on what we heard last time that seemed to say the district would like, or at least the board would like, this kind of feasibility analysis of all of the athletics first, then go forward with that. That should inform a decision on what does that field and facility want to look like. You don't need the facilities, and you don't need this analysis for any kind of permitting or design. But I think what it's intended to do is maybe help collectively put some clarity around, okay, here's the basis for why we ultimately land on a decision. That decision may be don't do anything. I don't know that it will, but I think it's just that step to kind of give a little more meat and flesh out the bones a little bit to say, okay, we looked at everything and it supports or it doesn't support additional amenities, and these would be what those additional amenities would be: field, track, restroom, lightings, et cetera, multiple fields.
Does anything you're going to do change the design or anything of the the main multi-purpose field? You're doing now. Is it changing any of that?
It's possible. It would seem more, to me, if it has an impact on that, it might be what elements are included, not necessarily, oh, don't put it in that spot. I think it's more about, all right, does it make sense to put a field house where we put it, or should we have it more central? So I think it's more of a kind of a massaging maybe of that, but we're open-minded about it. If it tells us something different as we talk to folks for some reason, then we would certainly consider that.
But we can modify.
Yes.
You mentioned a field house. Is that a part of the current plan that's before us tonight?
The current plan is purely, there is a building on there that's 1,000 square feet. It's identified as restrooms in the cost estimate. That 1,000 square feet could be anything we wanted it to be. If it wanted to be restrooms, just restrooms, that's what it is. If it wants to be concessions, then it's concessions. We've got a $600 per square foot number in there based on numbers we've had in the last couple of months of bidding that cover a field house. The content of it can change. It's not going to make much difference in the number.
Well, what would the size of a field house be?
That's a programming question. What do you want in it? Does
What
that include
what would the
storage?
size of a let me say this. Is it safe to assume that 1,000 square feet would not include a field house, restrooms, and concession stands?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah. Depends what you want. This is, again, as we've said multiple times before, there's a priority discussion here that either somebody tells us a budget or we come back to you and say, okay, it's going to cost you $12 million with all these things in it, but we can't be guessing in the dark. So to me, that's a big part of some of this programming and this analysis is, what do you want in your field house? And then it becomes, what can you afford? And if you want a 5,000 square foot field house, but you only have money for something less, what other elements would want to come out? It's part of how you push and pull to figure out what's the scope of work that you can achieve.
Let me ask this, and I don't believe that there's a motion and a second on the floor.
There's no motion on the floor.
But I know, well, I don't want to speak out of turn. But I also know that in the last meeting, I believe that we approved the administration's recommendation to amend the existing professional services agreement with EI to create up to 3 conceptual designs related to programs of all education buildings in the district and to provide an update to the enrollment study as directed by the board. Now, that's in addition to this. That's separate from what we're talking about. And the amount we approve for that is an additional $47,500. That's the purpose, or the purpose of that was to try to look at all of our educational buildings, to wrestle down this question: are we growing? To what extent are we growing? Are we out of space? Do our elementary schools need additions? Does our intermediate school need additions? Does our middle school need addition beyond that which we're contemplating in the current project? And the same thing to the high school. And that's a part of this comprehensive plan that, in my mind, we would need to see to understand the total needs of the district before I can vote in a favorable manner to spend $548,000 on design for an $8 million stadium to go behind the school district property that I'm not convinced we can afford yet.
One thing, if I could clarify, so the proposal, if you've read, a big chunk of the fee, just like an architect's fee, is a percentage of construction cost. So if this project becomes a $4 million project, our fee slides down accordingly to what that is. That gets established at the beginning once we've run through some amount of feasibility. Unfortunately, I don't think Mr. Kerr's here tonight. I mean, typically what we see, and again, I'm not going to try to pretend I'm an architect, but the architects work on the educational component and the programming associated with educational components. The programming associated with athletics is typically entirely separate. Programming for that building, I mean, we can certainly loop those guys in as needed. We probably would engage them as a consultant anyway, since they're already working with the district and we work with them. But the programming on a field house is a pretty nominal effort, what that's worth.
So as I'm looking at this document on page 5, you have a sort of breakdown of the costs here, and you have a summary of fees, $548,000. So what you're saying is that number might change, like how much we actually pay might change based on the stadium or the outdoor facility project that we ultimately approve?
Yeah, yes. So on that page, you'll see there's two components. Basic design services, that's where we say, look, that's stuff that's a percentage of construction costs. Those are things like fundamental, almost like comparable to how an architect structures their contract. It's the design, it's the bidding process, it's the construction phase process. That's all there. If that's based on, you'll see it's a $7.3 million number because we had like roughly $700,000 in soft costs in that $8 million to be a total $8 million number. If that 7.3 comes down to whatever, 4 million, our fee comes down with it. The permitting and approval services is likely going to stay the same. Those are required no matter what.
So the basic design services, the $438,000 is a percentage of the overall. And since you're estimating an $8 million project, that 438 is in proportion to that $8 million.
That is correct.
Okay, so just to reiterate, so I understand. So the so the 110,000, like that's whatever, we're locking that in.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, yes.
But the 438,000 might change based on not only the results of the feasibility study, because that might adjust sort of what we're after, but ultimately we're going to come up with something that maybe has a $4 million price tag or a $6 million price tag or an $8 million price tag, and that number is going to be a percentage of it.
Yes.
But not to exceed 438,000, or the 438,000 is really just kind of an estimate?
That's based on a $7.3 million construction cost. If for some reason the district says it's 10 million, well, then our fee goes up with the 10 million. It's a proportion of whatever that construction cost is.
I mean, one of the pieces that's been confusing to me is I keep looking at the picture, right, on page 6 in Exhibit A, and so I feel like I'm sort of agreeing to design work on this picture, but I don't think anyone here, even the most enthusiastic, are sold on this picture, right? I mean, the parking, for instance, I think there's a lot of us have expressed frustration about the parking. So you're saying that I shouldn't think of this picture as being like, that's the design work that we're doing.
Correct.
Because the sort of ultimate picture of the design work that we're doing hasn't been made yet.
Yes. Exactly. So yes. Some districts we come into say, we're telling you what we want. We want a field here with a track and a field house, and our budget is $5 million. And we go, cool, here's our fee, and off we go. That's not the case here. The case here seems to be, we don't really have a specified budget amount. We'd like to hear more, we the district, on tell us what you think we need based on your professional expertise and history on doing athletic projects. That's going to then inform the project. That sketch ultimately may become something different, and the cost that goes with it might be less. Or it might be phased. We might say, hey, we can only afford this much right now, but we're going to plan for field house later, so let's run conduit to a point and stop it so we're ready when we have the funds. The only kind of big asterisk I'm going to put there is we're going to want to have, we need that discussion with this group at some point before we start into design and permitting, because we got to know what we're working towards.
Yeah.
So kind of to your point, we get through this 3 or 4 weeks, we come back with here's what we think, here's what that told us. I will say this, us doing a feasibility study is not going to answer all the questions, because that just doesn't always come from the design professional. It comes from budget or for the project or what the client ultimately wants. So this is not going to be so prescriptive as to say we've run a bunch of equations and that tells us based on student population or X that you need these 17 things. It won't. I just want to manage that expectation. Now, it's going to give us a lot more background to help us understand, hey, we're fine with scheduling, right? We're fine with practices and fields. We're fine with, all the things that we had concerns about. But ultimately, there needs to be a pin stuck in this thing by leadership, administration, board that says, yep, here's the scope of improvements. or here's the budget, and we identify a priority list of those items to say, here's what y'all need or want to do, and here's what we can afford. Again, even if there's a phasing that says we're only going to do this part initially, and we'll come back to these other pieces later as we find funds.
I'm sorry if the horse is dead at this point, but I wanted to ask one more clarification question. The way that I'm thinking about this now is that we've got this $110,000 piece, and that if we vote yes now, we're sort of locking ourselves into that $110,000 piece. But we wouldn't be paying you anything else unless we actually did some construction. If like down the road we decided, no, we're not doing this, then it wouldn't be, right? Because everything else is a percentage of the actual construction.
So if the board decides after this planning discussion to move forward with some, even if it's, hey, we just want to do a turf field and nothing, if there's some athletic improvement, whatever it is, that percentage of construction cost applies, and that's what we would move forward on as our contract. Not, obviously that's a discussion here. And then also the 110. But the percentage of construction cost isn't going to go away unless you say, we're not doing the project. And if you say we're not doing the project, you're not going to pay the 110 either, because we're not going to do those permitting and approvals if we don't have a design on which to base them, right? So we're stepping in. It's if you end up telling us it's only $1 million project, well, then it's $1 million. Usually we slide the scale when it gets to a smaller amount of construction cost, because there's a minimum amount of effort, but you're still going to pay for that if the project is going to advance into any design at all. Yes. You could stop it at any point and say, oh, we only went 20% in, well, then we stop and you pay for what you build. And also, you're not bound, this doesn't bind you in any way to bid, accept bids, or construct anything. Those are steps along the way that we would say, hey, if we go to bid and the numbers came back awful and the district doesn't want to do anything, okay, it stops. If, that's a pretty key milestone. So we can include bid alternates, which we've done, and you've done it on other building projects that say, hey, we're not sure we can afford lights with this round, but let's put a price in there. So on bid day, we see it. And if it's a good price, for whatever reason is competitive, well, then we could take it. And if not, we take that out because it's not in the budget.
So if we give you, let's say, God willing, we were to vote, and we said, okay, $8 million. You would fit, and of course, 500-some thousand already got to come out of it.
Fred, up to the microphone.
The $500-some thousand have to come out of that. What would happen next?
So we would tackle the feasibility study. Again, that's the thing in the letter from the 7th, which is no design. It's just this evaluation of existing facilities, proposed sports, talking to stakeholders, come back with a report that we would share with the board that says, here's what we found, here's what we think that means in terms of what you need for your fields. That's a moment. Because at that moment, we're going to want some consensus from the board and administration saying, yep, we're going forward, no, we're not. If we're going forward, here's what the contents are, then all of this stuff happens at whatever level. Because if you tell me at that point it's only a $4 million project, fine. Then that basic services fee comes down, and we start designing and permitting. That's when, I think to the point you're getting to, that's when the rubber kind of hits the road, is when the board has come to, and again, an administration has said, this is what we want, here's our target in terms of scope and budget, then we proceed with the design and the permitting that's in the contract.
That's separate from what we need, the additional that we need to the school district, our buildings.
Correct.
There's two different animals. The
Correct. Yeah, EI's over here doing their thing with building programming. We're over here doing this piece with athletics.
That's what we're specifically talking about, the stadium right now.
Correct.
And again, to beat another deader horse than his horse is dead. This motion, as it sits here right now, if we vote yes, we're still no closer to what Fred ultimately wants, to breaking ground, than waiting 3 weeks until this feasibility study's done. Is that accurate or no?
Emotionally, maybe.
So it's an emotional vote.
I mean, okay. I guess I would kind of almost say, well, you are authorizing the study, even though you're not paying for the study, because we're saying, well, we're not going to charge extra for it. It's just part of the contract. that would, in my mind, say it's going to bring you closer to some discussion, in 4 weeks or whenever that, whatever that meeting is. In terms of seeing design and costing, no,
Okay.
that doesn't happen.
But when will you start design? When will you start costing?
After we would come back, share that study, and have some consensus from the board on, yep, we want to go forward or we don't. And if we want to go forward, it wants to include these things. That's kind of our launching off point. Until then, we can't, otherwise we're stabbing in the dark.
So based on what I'm hearing, there would really be no motivation whatsoever to approve a contract for $547,995 for design fees of an $8 million stadium that we don't plan to move forward with until we see the results of this EI study and we see the results of your further investigations.
So the EI study is not in any way, shape, or form going to speak to athletics. So I would, and I'll speak to Mr. Kerr about that to confirm, but it's completely separate, independent, and not related.
It's probably going to really, and I understand, but it's going to have potentially have a lot of impact on the amount of money and what the budget is really left over to be able to apply to these athletic needs.
I mean, if this is a budget question, we've been asking that for months. If what you're saying is we need to establish a budget to see what's left for athletics, that's fine. We'll stand down until somebody tells us what the budget is. But we can't go in either or no I mean, if you want to go in no direction, we'll stop. That's fine. I'm fine with that. We just continue to look for direction. If you're, and again, the contract that is in front of you is we're not going forward. If we get through this study, we don't bill you anything for the study. That's part of this contract. And 4 weeks from now, we present the study and you say, nope, we're done. You're not going to pay anything in this contract because we will not have done the work. If you want to split it out, I hate to even, I don't even really want to suggest it, to be honest, but we intentionally put it in here because we want it as part of the overall effort. If you're looking for a separate proposal for just the feasibility study, there's going to be a cost. And we'll do that separately, and we can come back to the board, and it's going to push it back a couple of weeks. But I'm fine. Whatever direction you want to give us, we'll take. We're just looking for what the direction is.
So I can only speak for myself, and I know, number one, I feel like I'm in a hamster wheel going in circles, and I feel like it's felt that way for quite a while. So over the last couple weeks, I've been doing a lot of digging in the background, and this has completely nothing to do with you. I appreciate your hard work. I think for me personally, where I'm hung up is the fact that we don't know how much money that we are potentially going to have to pay out of pocket, when we decide what the real needs of our schools are. As we've been walking and touring these schools for the last couple weeks, I mean, it is very, very apparent that we have a space issue in both of our elementary schools and in our high school. And I don't know how many people are aware of it because I don't know how many people are walking the schools other than myself and a couple other people. So that did, kind of get me searching. So Sherry, if you can bring up, and I gave each one of you guys a copy of what I put together. I'm a numbers person myself because the way that I feel about numbers is that they don't lie and they're not emotional. They tell a true story, they paint a picture, and for me, this is why I feel like we need to wait for EI to come back with a study on the schools to know what the true needs are, to know how much money we will actually be spending before we decide on a budget for a stadium. I mean, how can I say, yeah, I want to do $8 million? You guys, I totally want to do something for athletics, but I also care very deeply about the academics for our kids and having space. We did the special education tour the other day, and they're out of room. Everybody is out of room. So if you don't believe we're out of room, this document will show you that we're out of room. So in 2019, on the left side, you'll see this is James Byrd Elementary. EI did our feasibility study, and you'll see the big red arrow that says district capacity. The capacity for James Byrd was 470 students, and at the time that study was done, the enrollment was already at 475 students. Okay, so it was already 5 students over. And now you take the brand new enrollment data that was voted on tonight on the agenda, and current enrollment is 505. So we're 35 students over in that one single building. Now, look up at the top section on the right where it's green, red, it looks like Christmas. The class sizes are what are alarming to me. It goes back to what was pointed out a couple weeks ago, and that is per our policy in our district, K through 3, the recommended class size is 20 to 24 students. We have first grade and third grade that are already over what is in our policy as a school district. If that doesn't make you stand up on edge, then I don't know what will, because there's no plan to fix this issue. If you can go to the next slide, Sherry. Here's Nancy Grayson, same thing. On the left, you have the EI study. The district capacity was 448 when it was done. The enrollment at that time in 2019 was 449, meaning that it was, again, Nancy Grayson was already over capacity. And now with the data from the enrollment now 2022, we're at 486 students, so we're 38 kids over in this school building. Same thing when you look up at the top, the average class size in second grade is 24.6 students. And again, we have no plan for construction to fix this issue in Nancy Grayson. The next slide. The intermediate school, which, I think a lot of us felt, the intermediate school's good. We've always felt that it's good, space-wise, but again, it's borderline. It's teetering on that borderline capacity level with the way that we're enrolling in this district. And as of right now, current enrollment puts us 7 kids over what is recommended from the study. And again, we're over capacity with no plan. Go to the middle school. We have a plan to fix the middle school as a part of the work that we have been doing for over a year in this school district. The interesting thing that I found was actually the enrollment has dropped from 2019 to 2022. But we have a plan in place for 6 classrooms, right? So we're being proactive on that one. And now you go to the high school, which to me is the most alarming of all other than the elementary schools. And that is the capacity is 1,034 students. 2019, we were at 1,033. And right now, you guys, we're at 1,142 students. That's 108 students over what the recommended capacity is. And again, we're putting an athletic field. I absolutely agree. We need to do something for these kids. I'm at these football games every Friday night. I'm right there with you guys, cheering you guys on. But at what sacrifice? We have no plan to address the space issues. That is my concern. We don't know how much it's going to cost, and how could I, in good faith, vote $8 million away on athletics when I don't know what that number is going to look like or potentially going to look like when EI comes back and gives us, hey, you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. I know when the feasibility study was done in 2019, the recommended budget to fix all of the issues was $107 million. So you can only imagine what that number is going to be when it comes back. So, yes, I absolutely want to do something with athletics, but I feel like we need to pump the brakes a little bit, figure out what the actual school needs are, develop a plan for that alongside the athletic needs. I feel like we can chew bubble gum and walk at the same time. I just don't want to be irresponsible and kind of say yes. We're going to spend $550,000 and I don't know what that number is going to look like. So for me, again, numbers don't lie. They're not emotional. This is actual factual data versus how we feel emotionally about an issue.
For me, I agree. We need to do add-ons to classrooms. We need teachers. I have no problem with that. But we just paid $3 million for an ad for onto the middle school for an addition. For what, arts? No one said anything about that.
What do you mean?
That $3 million we're spending on the addition to the middle school.
Have you been in the band
I agree.
room?
It's
When there's 90 kids in that band room,
I'm
have
not
you ever
arguing
seen
that.
them elbow to elbow?
But no one said that we need to step back and evaluate that. We just said, go ahead and do it because the kids need it. But when it comes to the stadium, all of a sudden there's all kind of, that we can do this there, we can do that. We can do it. We've been talking about this for how many years? How long
Fred, that's because we did, as a board, again, the way that it's been handled has been backwards. We should have walked through the building first. When we started walking through them buildings and doing a tour and seeing what the actual space was, and then Becky and I were the only 2 board members that went on the special education tour, which we are going to be discussing because now we're getting an autistic classroom. We We also needed, and we're talking about a first grade classroom, but you know what? There's no room for one. There is no room for one. Now we have children and youth coming in. They had to we're putting a Franklin County social worker in a Cumberland County school. Why? Because there's no space.
So you're saying don't do the stadium? Don't do the stadium?
Nobody is saying don't do a stadium.
Fred?
We are saying we need to figure out how much money as a district we can afford to spend. That's what we need to figure out. And I'm sorry, Fred, I love you to death, and I am not going to say this. It's not going to come out correctly. I know it's not going to. But I feel like I would never be able to lay my head on my pillow if I said, oh, yeah, let's just go ahead and let's spend this money on this. But being in those schools and seeing those kids not being able to stand up, you go to the middle school, and yes, we're fixing this problem, but this is not just a middle school issue, that kids can't actually do labs in the science classrooms because they're elbow to elbow. Now, in the first grade, to make room, they're doing specials on carts because they don't have room, because we need to take a classroom back.
No one's arguing that point. Nobody about the room. I'm not arguing about the room. I'm saying if we set a price of start the stadium, and we find that we can't afford that, stop.
Fred, what these numbers tell me, that if we were getting a $50 million bond, we were already at capacity. So what that tells me, that every single dollar should have gone to education. And what it's looking like is we're probably going to have to look at another way to fund the stadium. Every single one of us sitting here knows that we need to address our athletic needs, and we all support athletics. However, when I was running, academics before athletics, always, because if our kids do not have an education, they won't even be able to play athletics, let alone the low participation. We need to go about this strategically. And the last meeting, when you asked why this item was removed from the agenda, Mark had told him that this was time to give the K&W engineers time to take a look at our facilities to see if what is being proposed in terms of a multi-purpose stadium is enough, or do we need an additional practice field at Memorial Park, etc., before a vote is taken by the board. Here we are, getting ready to make a vote when we don't have that information back. So again, putting the cart before the horse, and this is how feelings get hurt. Board members will get slain on social media for not addressing, or perceived to not be addressing, the needs. However, it is, when we're putting stuff on the agenda, when we're saying that we're waiting for numbers to come back, when you added an addendum for $47,500 and then you're spending $500,000, another approval here, it's not right. Like, it's backwards.
So was losing $6 million off the bond and other stuff. That was backwards also. But no one said nothing about that. I could have built the stadium. We can't even get, do you know, until we make a decision, we can't even get grants to find out, get money from the state or anything else.
The outreach committee has been working tirelessly and endlessly and strategically planning to help build and fund our athletic facilities, which the discussions on tonight for the executive director position is pretty much going to be the person that is going to help raise money. We want to partner and find a way to build a stadium. However, at what cost? I mean, I'm not willing to sacrifice academics. And I don't think any of us do. And we all want to address the needs. It's a matter of where is the common ground to get there, and to work together.
For me, I've been on the board for 3.5 years. This has been a question about athletics for 20 years. Every time something comes up, someone got another move backwards. We're gonna need to do this. We need to do this. And our kids, we had a game today, a JV game, football game at Mechanicsburg. They have a beautiful turf field. They have beautiful facilities. They didn't have any problem with the community, with that school district putting it in. Neither did Spring Grove, neither did Gettysburg. But come here at Shippensburg, It's a dire, well, we can't afford this, we can't afford that.
Fred, I'm just thankful that we didn't hurry up and do something. While you may have been working at this for 3.5 years, and this may have been a ongoing conversation, I was not part of the stadium conversation, and thank goodness there was some fresh eye.
Hold it.
We were at capacity when this, you didn't pick up on this.
Hold it. Ms. Luffy, did not myself and Jim Bard and someone else come through your school in the middle school to address the needs, and Dr. Suppo, and we told him that we needed to fix these problems? Did we, did or not? And we talked to Dr. Suppo about adding room for you because you had stuff out in the hall. So you weren't the first ones to go through the building. We went through the building when we got
Nobody
here.
said we were the first ones, Fred.
I heard only, but maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it was known. But I want you to know that people did do the same thing you did.
I do believe that, well, we said that we were the only two that went on the special education tour, and they are out of room. We need another first grade classroom. There is no room.
Build one? Did we build one?
That's what we're talking about, Fred. I mean, you're going to have to give up some of your $8 million for your stadium to address the academic needs.
Long as it's going around everywhere and other things that we got to give up, I have no problem.
But based on the discrepancy is, this is not new information. Most of these buildings were already at or above capacity.
I agree.
When the study was done.
Now, it's even more so. So what are we going to do moving forward to find a plan to address all of the needs? Because a lot has changed since this study was completed.
Hold on one second. Mr. August?
If I may, I think it would be very helpful, maybe to point about the versus if we set the,
Go here, Don.
As I listen, my thought process is, our construction folks need guidance. That's what I heard. We have a lot of priorities that we need to address. I think cart horse analogy makes sense, and from the construction world, one of two things has to happen. One, the board has to set an agenda and then make tough choices around what they're putting in. So I think from the board side, setting the dollar amount that the board is willing to commit to building projects, whether it's athletics or academic improvements, that is step one. That gives them guidance. I don't want to speak for the construction folks, but I believe that it's probably frustrating for them to not have guidance and to move forward. As I listen to this, it seems like we're asking them to tell us what we want. The first step in my non-starting here yet would be to have the board come together and set a number that we're going to borrow.
Amen. How long have we been asking for that?
It's actually a
what we've
great,
been asking
great
for.
point, because we had a vote for that probably 6 months ago. We tried to get a vote on $6.5 million, and it lost. So I totally agree with you. I'm just saying that vote has lost before. And I think there was actually a way of like 3.25 from the bond allowance, which of course was back when it was, before we had lost 6 million. We hadn't lost quite that much yet. And then it was like 3.25 from the fund balance, which includes 1.8 million, basically almost 1.8, that's been previously designated for the Greyhound Proud Foundation. Mr. Hilbinger, when he was on the board, he talked about the Peasers Fund and how there's a little less than $2 million that's left in that's, unless I'm wrong, it's just sitting there. I mean, I know we transferred $1 million for future 7th grade teachers, and we still have that money just sitting there. So if we say, hey, $3.25 million out of the total bond allowance, and then we take the rest of that from the fund balance, almost half of that is already being designated, then we can get a vote, and then as an act of good faith to the gentleman from K&W, we're able to go forward. I don't know how he still remains so calm. Because, excuse me, Beck, I'm almost done.
No, you're fine.
Because every 2 weeks we come, we sit, we talk, and we go back to the drawing board. He just said about another 3 or 4 weeks till we get that study back. That's great. Last week, or 2 weeks ago when you were here, you said it's like 16 months from go to get us a multi-purpose athletic stadium. It's bad enough that our track team last year had 2 home meets, and that was it because of our inadequate track, which spent $42,000 on to paint and fix some potholes. This spring, I'm sure, I haven't seen the athletic schedule, we probably only have 1 or 2 home track meets. Do the math in my head, 1 year from now, just say would be November, add on another 4 months, we could very possibly, if we were to get moving in a somewhat timely fashion, be able to provide our track and field team as the first group of kids on a new multi-purpose athletic stadium for $6.5 million. The idea came up, somebody said about concession stands. We don't have one now. The school district doesn't control the concession stand at Memorial Park. The Lions Club does, and that's wonderful, and they give money back to the community through some scholarships and things, and that's awesome, but we don't control it. We already pull a food truck in down by the old pool. I'm not against that. I think that $6.5 million, I can't pronounce your last name, I'm sorry, Borowski, he could most definitely give us, I would think, something on $6.5 million because that's what he's asking for. So again, I don't know how many times we have to say this. Mr. August brought up a great point. We tried to do this 6 months ago, lost. But I am just so ready to move forward for our community and our children because we have a major need with this, as we have other major needs with some other buildings, and there's no doubt about that. And the outreach committee, that's great that we're working toward things and grants and funding and the executive director position, that's wonderful. But wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a project approved, so when that person gets hired, they can say, hey, the first thing I can do is walk across the street to Volvo and be like, hey, would you like to be the official sponsor of this stadium? Who knows? Maybe they say no, but I'm willing to bet they would do it. Mr. Hess from the Greyhound Foundation Athletic Wing came here 2 weeks ago and said, if you say we need $1 million, we'll go find it. It'd be great if we would give somebody in the community direction that we could be like, hey, we're voting for this, we're moving forward, here we go, and then we can go find this money, and we might find out that if it's $6.5 million, we don't actually need $6.5 million because we can find ways to get that money. Okay.
I think the problem is though, Levi, and I am 100% with you. Like athletics has to happen. Like we have to find a way to do that. But at this point, we don't know how much the cost is going to be for the elementary schools, and or if we're going to have to add in more classrooms to the high school. So how can I, in good conscience, say yes, I'm going to do $8 million to a stadium? But what if we needed extra $20 million to for the school additions?
That's a great
Then
point.
what?
That's a great point. We're not taking $8 million for a stadium. As I just mentioned, we've had a previous motion that failed. $6.5 million is great, but that's not all coming from the bond. That would be like $3.25 million is what Mr. Scott proposed like 6 months ago. So at most of our bond allowance on our level debt service is $3.25 million. That's it. We really look to pull other money from fund balance that's already been designated, and we get going with projects. I totally get it. There's needs out there. I have 2 young kids. I'm the youngest person on the board too.
Brag, Levi.
I have the youngest kids of anybody on this school board. When I look at these elementary problems, you don't think, there's a personal connect there, without a doubt. I have a first grader and I have an 18-month-old. They're gonna live through this if we don't make improvements. 100% agree. But I think we could get a vote out of good faith to K&W to go forward with this while also looking at these projects that are coming back and doing a stadium in a really sufficient, economically appropriate way. Not saying we need to build Trojan Stadium. It'd be great if we could, we really can't. But I think it'd be great if we could build something that's at least adequate enough for all of our students. Again, we keep saying athletics. Every one of our students has to take gym class, which will go outside onto that field every single day as long as it's not raining, and get usage out of that. Our community in general would get usage out of that. We, as a part of this, never been discussed, but I would love to see some sort of stage put onto that, so we could, onto that multi-purpose field somewhere, where we can hold concerts within the community for the band, for student bands, or for groups, or whatever the case may be, to get good usage out of something that we are putting our money into. I think that's it.
Well, and as I said about a year and a half ago, we have to look at athletic facilities as a building, because it is. And we do have space issues, and we're going to have to address those, and we may have to address those with more bond money than we really want to. But the problem with the athletic facilities as part of a building is it's crumbling. It's crumbling, and it's downright dangerous. And this board has to address that.
If I may, I hear so much common ground among everyone on the board. Everyone wants to improve facilities. Everyone has slightly different priorities. Again, I would just urge the board, and again, I'm kind of in this limbo world, to focus on the financial piece, make that hard decision, make that sustainable decision, make a decision that gets the ball rolling, and go from there, and then make hard choices on where that money's going to go, understanding that we may not be able to, in the short term, address everything immediately, but if it's designed well, it can be moved in that direction. Again, I would just urge the board, and in talking with Dr. Moyer, the financial piece is the linchpin of this. Getting a number to our construction people allows them to give the board options that then we can pick and choose which directions and which programs we're going to help in the short term, working with the business office to make sure that that is sustainable and that we still have the ability, whether it's through grants or other mechanisms, to meet those other needs as they come up. So that, for a person that's not here yet, that's the common ground I hear. That would be my urgent request of the board, is to come to some consensus around at least an initial, financial flag in the ground that moves this argument forward, and that give and take can happen. So I appreciate you allowing me to speak here. And again, I just want to end with, the common ground is here among all board members. Okay, we've all got a piece of it. We are all interested in the same thing. We just need to listen to the folks that are doing this, and give them what they need, and make tough decisions that are sustainable and move us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, well, here we are on 5F. Is there any motions on 5F right now?
Yes. I make a motion that we proceed with $7 million between the fund balance and the bond.
Hold on. Fred, the motion on the floor is 5F.
So we ain't getting, I gotta wait till the other part for that?
Say that again?
I'll wait till the other part. Yeah.
Well, the financial number is not on the agenda.
Okay.
So what I'm looking for is, I'm trying to get through this agenda, and I'm looking at 5F.
Okay, I misunderstood.
Is there any motion on 5F? To approve 5F.
I'll move to approve.
Mr. Bard motions to approve 5F. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kressler. Any further discussion on 5F? Roll call.
Mr. Dwayne Burt,
No.
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
No.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
No.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
No.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
No.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
4 yes, 5 no. Motion failed.
5F fails. Moving on to 5G. Recommendation to reject bids for the middle school project. Chad, I think this might be your item.
Yeah, this was for the middle school bids that we were currently working on last week. There was a addendum that came through last minute. It came through September 27th, and the bid dates were due August, or the deadline was October 6th, I'm sorry. So there was a protest after the bid because this addendum didn't get through in enough time. It has to get through 2 days before the final deadline or the bids are due. So we went through the bidding process, the bids came through, and within the first 10 minutes, there was a protest on the bids, which is not a huge deal, but we are recommending that we reject all bids. That way we can redo the bidding process, and it will, and advertise for the bids immediately and just start the process over again.
Any questions for Chad on 5G? Is there a motion to approve 5G?
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Suiters. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Eberly. Discussion? Roll call?
Do we want to wait till Dwayne comes back to,
Where'd he go?
or do you want me to go ahead and do roll call?
Call him last.
Okay. Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
I didn't see him leave because he went to the bathroom. I didn't see him leave. He just walked.
Hold on.
Actually, because some of these bids were open, that's how this could be a blessing in disguise. Because now,
He told me we're going to save about 50,000.
yeah, so it's not all bad.
We should do this more often.
Yeah.
So we're on, Mr. Burt, we're on 5G. There's a motion on the floor. So roll call. Mr. Dwayne Burt.
Yes, you have no choice.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christie. 5H is the memorandum of agreement between the school district and the Shippensburg Area Educational Support Association to include the registered behavior technician position in the collective bargaining agreement. Is there a motion to approve 5H?
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Mrs. Eberly. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Wolfinger. Discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Stephanie Eberly,
Yes.
Dr. Nathan Goetz,
Yes.
Mr. Fred Scott,
Yes.
Mrs. Becky Wolfinger,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Bard,
Yes.
Mr. Dwayne Burt,
Yes,
Mr. Levi Kressler,
Yes.
Mr. Charlie Suiters,
Yes.
Mr. Mark Butterball.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Christie. That concludes the action agenda. We'll move on to the discussion agenda. I'm going to skip over 6A and B because I think we might have exhausted that tonight. 6C is the cybersecurity
excuse-
solution with CAIU Task Force Protecting Against Cybercrime. Does any board member have any questions on 6C?
I have a question. The one you're skipping over, is that just, that's action's done, so this is just discussion?
Well, Fred, we have spent the last 45 minutes discussing athletics and facilities, so I thought maybe we were done with that discussion.
No. I want to make a motion
For what?
for proceed with the project, the stadium project. So everybody can say yes or no.
Do that with the sunshine rules.
Well, the problem is you're going to make a motion on a monetary amount, and it hasn't appeared on the discussion agenda. So the public didn't have the opportunity to know that it was on an agenda. The 5F was on the agenda, but when 5F does not refer to a specific monetary amount.
I thought it was 8 million. I thought we discussed the 8 million when they bought that program and showed they could go up to, they had up to 8 million for the stadium. I thought that was discussed 2 meetings ago.
No, what I'm saying is that there is nothing on the agenda to approve an 8 million for public notice. Public hadn't have noticed that we were voting tonight to approve $8 million for stadium.
Mr. Butterball, my understanding, Mr. Scott, is it's a discussion item this week. Mr. Butterball we've had.
Correct.
Is there a need for more discussion around that at this point? Next week, it should move as an action item that would be voted on by the board. So there's no,
Right.
beyond the discussion of this week, it is going to move unless someone tables it or does
Sure.
other action. It's going to move to a vote next board meeting at that number as written in that form.
Yeah, if you want to move the $8 million to the action agenda for the next meeting, since there is a discussion agenda item here, that's fine, but to make a motion to vote on it tonight would be out of order. Do you want it on the action agenda for the next meeting?
I asked for it.
Okay.
Remember, I sent you an email asking for it to be on the action agenda. And I want it on the action agenda every meeting till it's passed or I'm off this board. I have a right to do that. I check.
Hold on, Fred. I'm checking to see what you actually sent me. Yeah, I believe what you sent me was an email that led to 5F being put on the agenda to get the K&W engineers moving forward on design. I don't recall your email saying anything about a specific price tag.
I didn't think I needed to. I thought the $8 million was already predetermined. But okay, all right.
So you want the $8 million price tag on the agenda for
Up
next
to $8 million.
action agenda?
Up to $8 million.
Okay.
Let them go.
Is that really appropriate for one person to put a price tag on 8 million when Levi said 6.5 million and Bill just said for the board to come together and come up with a monetary amount?
Well, let me say this. If you want some more comments, I want to see a comprehensive plan for this school district, looking at all the needs, the space needs and so forth, to include these athletic needs. And then I think we should then come up with an overall number, and there would be a component that would relate to athletics and how that might look. But I can tell you, you're not going to get my support for an $8 million stadium until I understand the total financial needs of this district and in terms of, are we growing, what additional space needs are in all these buildings and all the rest of this stuff, and what the price tag of that is. Because to do this in any other way, in my opinion, would be reckless. All I've ever asked for is a and no one can. It would be hard I think for anyone to argue with the idea that we want to put in focus all the needs of this district over the lifespan of these projects we're going to do, because we're going to be locked into debt service on these projects for 25 years. We will therefore be pretty much locked out of doing anything else major, and which means we can't afford to get this wrong. If we have space needs in our elementary schools or in any of these, it's got to be a part of this. And right now, there is no plan to address any of that. That's the biggest part of Mrs. Wolfinger's presentation that should really ring true, except for the middle school. And the fact is, we've already got plans for those spaces. There's 4 classrooms that will be. The minute we get those classrooms built, we have a financial plan to occupy those classrooms with 4 teachers that make the move from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. The class sizes equal, the number of teams equal. 4 of those classrooms are immediately, and the 2 smaller classrooms are already. There were plans for them. So there's really not even any plan for that. So I just want to see a comprehensive plan for the needs of the district, and we'll get at it. And I'm not moving until.
Okay, well, regarding Ms. Eberly's inquiry, I do believe that if Fred would like that motion to be placed on the action agenda, it is appropriate, because it's an appropriate motion to approve what K&W originally recommended, which was an $8 million stadium. Whether that passes or not, or whether Levi would like to amend that motion to downgrade that to $6.5 million is one thing, but when we're talking about the $8 million number, it is the recommendation that was presented to the board.
Thank you.
Any other information on that? 6D is the proposal with Cengage Learning. Any questions for the administration on 6D? 6E is increase English as a second language teachers from the Capital Area Intermediate Unit. Any questions for the administration tonight on that? 6F is the request to form a mindfulness club at the high school. Any discussion on that tonight? 6G is the authorization for payment of November and December bills. The reason this is on the agenda is because the board will only be meeting one time in November and one time in December. Any discussion on that this evening? 6H is the job description update for the elementary K-8 virtual education teacher. Any discussion on that tonight? 6I was struck from the discussion agenda at the beginning of the meeting. 6J is approval for positions for additional autism support classroom at James Byrd. Any discussion on that this evening? 6K is the executive director for the school district and the Greyhound Foundation, a 50-50 partnership that Mrs. Wolfinger discussed and the outreach committee is recommending. Any discussion on that tonight?
Yeah, a quick question on that. So I appreciate the work that we're doing here and the effort that we're going forward, but I guess this is a process question, but because I think we'd like to be able to see what that job description looks like and the salary benefits component on the discussion agenda before we vote on it, right? So I guess the question is here, is this going to stay on the discussion agenda for next time so that we can see that stuff? Or is
It'll
our
probably
first-
need to stay on the discussion agenda one more time to allow us ample time to get both the job description done and the budget piece of it done as well. Basically, we just want to make our commitment known that we do want to partner with the Greyhound Foundation in this kind of little adventure we're going on.
Because I want to make it clear that I applaud the effort. I think this is awesome. It's a great direction we're going. I just want to make sure that and I don't want to hold things up, but I just want to make sure that we're giving ourselves adequate time to vet the details.
Yeah, I mean, so it's October. I would say we'd probably be safe the first first and only meeting in November to approve it.
Okay.
I think if we have the job description and the budget, we can kind of present to you guys to kind of, go through next time and then maybe the following meeting to be able to approve it.
I would just add for information that there actually is a job description. A job description was reviewed by the committee and so
It
forth.
was handed out last meeting as well.
And the decision was made by the group to form a small group to fine tune the job description, as well as a rough idea of salary was discussed with the idea that another small group that includes our business administrator and so forth would work on, fine tuning that salary number as well as the additional benefits cost. The discussion was that the person would, at least the idea was discussed, the person would be a part of the school district Act 93 group, and then the foundation would be billed on some quarterly basis or something like that for their part of the cost.
Dr. Moyer, hold the item on the discussion.
Will do.
We'll now open the meeting for citizen comments regarding any other items that you might want to address the board. Marlon?
Hi.
Welcome back.
No. My name is Marlene Reed, 250 Patterson Drive. First of all, I want to applaud the efforts on the executive director position. That's something near and dear to my heart. I am hoping that it will get passed. So thank you on that. Second, in regards to Steph's concern about Franklin County Children and Youth Services into the district, isn't that something that should have been presented to the parents as a notification? I have a child in SAIS, I have a child in the high school. I get notifications on a weekly to a biweekly basis of everything that is occurring in the district, in the schools. and that is not one that I have received. I think that is something that is very important for all of the parents to know that this has happened and what they're able to do or assist, and how they can assist Franklin County students. And as Ms. Eberly had stated, that could put fear into some parents, and I think that also needs to be addressed. So I think I would have liked to have known that prior to the approval, but now that it has been approved, I think that is something that needs to be mentioned to the parents to let them know that what is happening in the schools. That's it.
Thank you, Marlon. Any other public comments?
Mark, can I just ask a question real quick? Because of SHAD security, is it possible that we can get them board approved to use them in the future because we need them as a second backup? And since they're already used, for our homecoming dance, I don't know if we put it on discussion or if it could be approved now, but get them on
Can't
board.
be approved now.
Okay. So can we,
Proposal from them.
Yep. We need a proposal, and then it'll have to go on the discussion agenda.
okay.
Does any board members have any final comments?
You know I do. I have two things. One was about the item that was struck tonight about the school police or security officer. I'm really looking forward to that public meeting. Dr. Moyer, we've talked numerous times about it. I've talked about it publicly a ton. It's something that I think should have happened a long time ago, my own personal belief, but I'm excited the fact that we're starting to move forward. And I think being on the safety committee, we received, I was at 2 of those 3 meetings, proposals, and I was just really wowed with quality information. So thanks to everybody who came in and talked to us. So looking forward to that community meeting, and I think we'll see some major support from that. One thing is I was digging through my notes, and this is back from the summertime. We had our foreign exchange students from last school year present us flags before they left. I was just wondering if we had any update as to what happened to them or if they were hanging anywhere, because I think that'd be a super cool tradition. I don't recall where those 2 students were from, that if we designated an area somewhere in the high school to say, hey, this is it, and then going forward we do that. I think that'd be awesome. So I'm just curious if we have any update on that.
They are still in my office area. They're not in my office, but they're in the office area just because we wanted to make sure that we could add them since we have a large number of foreign exchange students every year. So it's something that we just don't want to put up somewhere and then realize that we have like 40 of them. So
Right.
we're still brainstorming on that.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just want to say I enjoyed seeing all of the homecoming pictures, and everyone looked great, beautiful, dapper, and thanks to the staff who put in all of that time, long hours decorating, chaperoning. It was appreciated.
Yes. Yes, it's too late.
I just want to say thank you to both Lauren and Bethany for the tour last week. It was very, very eye-opening. And I really feel, again, if you haven't taken the time to go do that special education tour, I'm just going to kind of re-point it out like Dr. Moyer said earlier. I kind of beg you guys to do that, to see it from their perspective. And I know that we are planning on also visiting the high school and also at the college as well. On our next little tour. So I just encourage all of you guys to take time out to do that.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
To the hospital.
You heard from me, huh?
Yeah,